Dan, I would like to introduce Dan Lavery. He's with the Loulou Foundation and the Orphan Disease Center. And Dan, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Great, Karen. Thank you so much. I have slides to show. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. At least my Zoom colleagues can tell me. So
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. So it's a great pleasure to chat with you all today. Thanks so much. I'm going to keep an eye on my time because we actually got a bit of a late start, and I want to give plenty of time left to Helen, Leonard, and to Amanda Joksha later in the session, and then a nice question and answer panel at the end to help field questions from everybody listening to the presentations today. But I do want to say thank you, Antonino, for that wonderful introduction, because in fact, that meeting in Rome was about 2 or 3 days after I had started at the Loulou Foundation back in 2017. And I clearly remember your call to action about how critical it is to have quality patient registries operating as soon as possible to collect the highest quality data. And it really comes down to 2 things. One was something that was mentioned by a CDKL5 mom recently, and that is knowledge is power. The power to be able to drive novel therapeutics, gene therapies, really requires the knowledge of our disorder. But then the second is something that's true with all rare diseases, but particularly in ours, we certainly feel it. And that's that unity is strength. That too many disparate activities will squander our patient community, will squander our efforts, and will squander the drug development efforts that are so important to bringing needed treatments to our families. And so when I talk today, you can see on my screen, we're discussing the relaunch of the CDKL5 registry. It's because the CDKL5 registry has existed since 2018, but we soon realized after that it was open that we needed to have a more concerted effort to unify our community, both the scientific community and the patient community, around a registry that will allow for collaborative work between our scientists and to simplify the data collection from our families so that not only do we collect high quality data, but we reduce the burdens on our families to increase the number of families who are engaged, as well as the quality of the data that we're able to collect. So that's what we're happy to describe here today, working very hard with everyone on this call, and particularly with everyone on this Zoom call, but also many other people. We've worked for several years to get to this point where we believe that we have important improvements to the way the CDKL5 registry is run, and that we're ready to launch that to the community in a way that we hope will lead to a big success in our ability to collect quality data. So just to announce, active today, the CDKL5 registry is now easily accessible through a simplified URL. You need only go to www.cdkl5registry.org. You'll land on a web page that helps describe why we're doing what we're doing, what this means to families, what this means to researchers, and gives you an easy way to click on a Register Now button that will immediately take you to the registry itself to either enroll or to log in to help add your data. And this slide I show because it is so very important. There's so much feedback we got when the CDKL5 registry was first opened back in 2018, because it was never fully explained to the whole community, scientific and patient community, what all these different data collection efforts were. And they ranged from efforts that were more focused on, if people can see my cursor, more focused on creating a patient contact registry, meaning essentially a membership list with some information about your patient families. Other efforts, including the effort that Antonino described that was established in Italy with Insieme Verso la Cura, their first patient clinical registry collecting clinical data, as well as efforts led mostly in the US to run a natural history study on CDKL5. And then as well, an important effort that's been run by Helen, Leonard, and Jenny Downs in Australia, Telethon Kids Institute, which collects both patient data and is starting to integrate the clinical data. It wasn't clear how all of these efforts were going to be able to combine together in order to provide the unity that we need to generate the quality data. And because of the efforts in the last 2 years of intensely working to be able to integrate all these efforts, we're happy to say that now this whole group has established an alignment of data that will help to optimize the way the data are collected and reduce the burden on the families to help with their participation. So when we talk about registries, patient data clinical registries, what does that really mean? In the ideal situation, a modern registry will do 4 different things. It will help organize the patient community. And if that's all that it does, which is still extremely useful, that can be referred to as a contact registry. But beyond that, we want the ability to collect patient data reported by families or reported by clinicians to be able to be input in a way that would help us grow that into a full-blown, comprehensive clinical research database. We then want to be able to provide the way for researchers collaborating around the world to work together in order to analyze the data in a useful way, to develop and test new treatments. This is the key. We can't have 5 or 6 different efforts going in opposite directions. We need to align ourselves in ways that are respecting the quality of the data, respecting the data privacy issues, but providing the researchers the information that they need to make the right decisions. And then finally, the 4th thing we would hope for from a registry is that that system would allow families to be able to learn about opportunities to participate in new clinical studies, including new drug therapy trials, gene therapy trials, learning about them in a way as soon as possible to see if it's something that they would be interested in participating in. So in order to meet all these 4 different criteria, the CDKL5 registry was created by the Loulou Foundation working with the Orphan Disease Center at the University of Pennsylvania in very close collaboration with our collaborative partner Pulse InfoFrame in order to create the modern CDKL5 registry. As we said, this CDKL5 registry is able to collect quality data either provided by the families and caregivers and collecting it longitudinally over time to get a full picture of the natural history of the disorder, and will also allow us to link in clinical data, either clinical data provided by the families through their GPs, or being able to link up some of the other studies that we talked about, including the Italian clinical data registry, as well as working with the clinical network in the US to be able to import their data through a data sharing agreement in order to provide in one place all of these data properly aligned. It's important for the data security that we're able to establish a modern registry that's cloud-based, fully compliant with data privacy regulations and laws nationally and internationally, and being able to collect, annotate, and analyze the data with the stringent requirements that satisfy regulatory agencies for the presentation of clinical data for clinical trials. We want these data to be useful, not just to other clinicians, to other researchers, but also as a way to present the case why therapeutics should be reviewed by the FDA. So that's why we needed to create the registry to help the research and drug development. But why would the families want to join the CDKL5 registry? Well, really, there are 3 main reasons. The first is that you can contribute to the community by contributing data about your child or loved one living with CDD. It's important, as Antonina pointed out, the disorder's only been recognized for about 15 years. The first clinical descriptions, of which Helen was an important part of, have really only come out in about the last 12 years. There's still much that we don't know. How do symptoms vary and to what degree between patients? How do the symptoms change in our patients as they get older, as kids go through puberty, as folks get older? These are important questions that need to be answered and can be only answered with the data that the families provide. The second reason why families should join is that this does give you the opportunity to learn about new opportunities to participate in clinical trials. This, of course, does not, just because you sign up for the registry does not mean you are obliged to participate. It really just presents to you the opportunities to participate if you so choose. It's entirely your choice, but you will find out as soon as the community knows. And then the third advantage to the CDKL5 registry is that Pulse InfoFrame has built a dashboard specific to your child that will allow you to see your data presented in real time as the data are entered into the registry. And I think that this is a nice feature that gives a little bit back to the families. The families are giving so much in sharing their data. This is a nice thing that can be shared back with the families. And Famita Guadri-Sridhar, whom we'll hear from later, she was kind enough to share some data from a separate patient registry Here, actually, these are different symptoms that are monitored over time, different aspects such as a sleep score and pain score. And what you can imagine is that if this were for CDD, what you would see is as a family's entering on the lower panel, these are some data that were just put together for illustrative purposes by Sheridan Carrington, my colleague at the ODC. You can see that, for instance, data from a seizure diary or the average length of seizures will be compared for your child in blue compared to the overall population in orange, and give you a way to visualize how your child is doing compared to the rest of the field, the rest of the patients in the group. So those are the reasons why we started on the reorganization. Those are the reasons why we think families should join. But a very important one is here that's expressed. I understand it's a very busy slide, but it's important to point out that one of the most important things we do in our relaunch of the CDKL5 registry is integrate the work that's being done by Dr. Helen Leonard and Dr. Jenny Downs. As I say on the slide here, they've been working for since 2012 and certainly before that as well, Helen, but at least historically speaking, the collaboration with IFCR, I think, started in 2012. There's an enormous body of data that Helen and her colleagues have collected to look at many aspects of CDKL5 symptomatology, epidemiology, and quality of life. For instance, if you do a PubMed search, it's Helen Leonard's name is the only one associated with the critical data on epidemiology and symptomatology. How can we work with the CDKL5 registry in ways that don't burden the families by asking the same questions that Helen would be asking, and in the same way enable Helen to be able to go a little bit farther in her work to extend and expand the sorts of questions she's asking? This is actually something that took us quite a while to work out the details on, but we have now a system in place that allows us, with the parents' consent, to share the individual patient level data with Helen in ways that allows all the data that are collected in the CDKL5 registry to be aligned with the data that she's collected in the Telethon Kids ICDD. This is a way to not lose all that beautiful work that's been done previously, and allows us to ask the questions that Helen would ask and provide her the data and align it at the individual patient level. This way, her work can continue and it frees her up from having to ask the same questions that are being asked for CDKL5 registry. And it also, importantly, minimizes the burden on the families by not having to ask the same questions over and over. This we understand is absolutely essential to not fatigue our parents and to maintain their interest in engaging with the CDKL5 registry. So for these reasons, we've now launched the CDKL5 registry in streamlining it by having a single simple URL. If you go to cdkl5registry.org, www.cdkl5registry.org, that'll take you to a beautiful web page that was designed in collaboration with all the group here, that will present information about the registry itself, further explanation for families, information for researchers about how they might participate and gain access to the data, and other aspects of it. Most importantly, though, are these large Register Now buttons that allow you, if you click then, to go immediately to the actual CDKL5 registry platform itself in order to start your enrollment process and filling out then the consent forms to participate. Or if you've already registered, all you have to do is click here to be able to log in. In this way, we hope we've streamlined the process to make it easier to get to where you need to go. Then once you've logged in and finished your consent form, you'll then see that there's a whole menu of different surveys that we want you to fill out. Now, I hope this isn't overwhelming, that it looks like there's a whole laundry list of things that have to be done. But just note that some of the information that's being asked for, such as patient history, need only be filled out once. Some are just annual surveys. They only need to be filled out once a year, others 6 months. And then others, for instance, the seizure diary you will request updates a little more frequently. But the idea is it's designed to be as user-friendly and as understanding of the time burden on the families as it can be. And we'll give you plenty of time to be able to go through it as you're leading your busy lives. But this, we hope, as part of the relaunch, got feedback from some of the families who've been working with us on this in order to really demonstrate we really need to be working hard to align all of our efforts and reduce the burdens on the families. Okay, so in our relaunch, the 3 most important points are to critically minimize the burden that we're asking of these families in order to participate in the registry. And one of the most important ways we're doing that is by uniting and aligning all of the research efforts that are going on, reduce redundancy, efficiently share data so that it's used more effectively by more researchers. And that increase in the quality and quantity of data will help push our research forward. We actually incorporated more feedback from the community. There were some important elements that really needed to be fixed, and then we only heard about them once we had our families do beta testing of the CDKL5 registry. This included, for instance, a suggestion that actually came from Karen, in which she said, you really need to have a save button to allow you to pause in the middle of a survey without going to the end, so that if you have something happening in your day, like if your child has a seizure or if someone knocks at the door, you can save your work without having to lose it all and start all from the beginning. That and many other feedback items were incorporated into making it a much more user-friendly and robust registry experience. And so then the third thing was to integrate all of that into the platform that currently exists, which was a great collaborative effort between all of the people on our team, the folks working within Pulse InfoFrame. And that means that now we have a product that is much more robust and useful for the families. To this point now, we actually have had almost 50 families who have already enrolled and actually started entering their data. Important for us to note that nothing will change for you. The entered data are still there, and we're very happy that you've been inputting data up till now. We will, however, ask you to re-agree to a new consent form because of the changes that we've added to improve the registry. Just our IRB requires that we then ask you to re-sign a consent form in order to take part in the registry moving forward. As currently configured, the CDKL5 registry is available in English, but we have full-on plans working with translators to do back and forward translation in order to provide options in 8 different languages important to the community before the end of 2020. And we're happy to hold ourselves to that. We'll be sure to let the community know as these come online. If, aside from the languages listed here, there are others that the community feels are important to add, they can be added as needed. So we're looking forward to that in a way that it will help expand our footprint. We understand CDKL5 is a global disorder. All drug development moving forward really is going to have to rely on our global alliance, not just in any one country. And this reflects that global nature of our registry. Just a nice little incentive if you need one. The Loulou Foundation has kindly offered to donate $100 in your child's name to CDKL5 research if you register immediately. And so we're looking forward to that. You'll see that as a pop-up as it comes up on the CDKL5registry.org page. When you follow it through, we'll be happy to follow up and make that donation in your child's name. And then finally, that's what I wanted to cover now. I look forward to all the questions we'll have, but also encourage families to go to CDKL5registry.org, test it out, see the videos we've put up, learn about the registry, and then more importantly, then click through to enroll in the CDKL5 registry to become part of this whole wonderful process that will help drive our drug development. And just I thank you to the whole community who's been involved in this since the registry was first opened up. But I do want to thank in particular some people, including from the Loulou Foundation, Lynn Jafar, who was incredible in the improvements to the graphic design layout and video production for the registry. At IFCR, we work very closely with Karen and Amanda, as well as their communications consultant, Jennifer Michelle. Helen and Jenny were critical to this. We really appreciate their collaborative effort. Famita Gwadri Sridhar, the founder and CEO of Pulse, worked very closely with us, including at one point taking in one day a flight from the east coast of Australia to the west coast to visit Helen and Jenny and then back, just as a way to help move this process forward. And then, of course, feedback we got from the CDKL5 Alliance, the families that we tested the platform on, with great support from Antonino, as well as Carol Ann Partridge in the UK and Pam Bauer early on from CDKL5 Netherlands. And then last is my colleague Sheridan Carrington, who carried a lot of the water for me and did a lot of the hard work where I got to take all the glory. So just reminding you, please visit the website, CDKL5registry.org, and that will allow you to click through to the registry to be able to register now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dan. That was great. And we're all excited to support this effort. Because we're running on time, I'm just going to pass it off to Dr. Helen Leonard and let her take over from here.
Thank you.
Helen, feel free to say something about yourself. I'm sorry.
All right, that's all right. Let me just get my screen on first. So, won't be a minute.
No problem.
Yeah. More. Share screen. Okay. So first of all, can you see my slides before I introduce myself?
Yes.
You can. Great, great. Okay, I'm Dr. Helen Leonard, and I suppose established the international CDKL5 Disorder Database and have continued to work on CDKL5 for quite some years. So I'll tell you a bit about that in my talk, which is really entitled Goals. And first of all, before I move on to that, I must thank both Karen and Amanda for inviting me to speak at this innovative online conference. It really it is a pleasure, and thanks so much for getting this organized. So I will be talking about the goals of the International CDKL5 Disorder Database, past, present, and future. You know, where we started, what we have done, and what our plans are for the future. So how did it all begin? Now, some of you may have seen this slide before, others may not, because some of you may have young children and recent diagnosis. But this was the family in Australia where the mutation in the CDKL5 was first identified. And I met this family now over 25 years ago. I met this family when the girl on the left had a diagnosis of autism, and the girl on the right had a diagnosis of atypical Rett syndrome, early onset seizure variant of Rett syndrome, as it was called then. And this was before the MECP2 gene was identified as a cause of Rett syndrome. Anyway, when it was identified and the testing occurred in this family, no mutation was found in the MECP2 gene. And it was 4 or 5 years later, when eventually in this family with twin girls and a brother who had died of a severe neurological disorder, the mutation was found in the CDKL5 gene. And so the rest is history, should we say. Anyway, so that was my initial interest in CDKL5, and I think I must express my dedication to Lita Waltwood, the parent of this family, who I talked with this week, and has been really an inspiration to me in my journey in CDKL5. So what we did initially was we had an international Rett syndrome database where we had children with Rett syndrome and MECP2 mutations, and then a small number with CDKL5, and they had mutations in the CDKL5 gene. And way back then, we decided to compare. This was in 2011, 2012, 2011, I should say, compare the characteristics of those with Rett syndrome and those with CDKL5. And we did that, and you probably may have seen this slide before, but it really points out the important features of CDKL5 compared with Rett syndrome: the seizures within the first year of life, usually the first 3 months, global developmental delay with severely impaired gross motor function, and then often sleep disturbances, hypotonia, bruxism, gastrointestinal issues. And interestingly, at that time, we said it was unlikely to have independent walking, microcephaly, and major malformations. Now, I'm not so sure that it's that unlikely to have, it's rarer to have independent walking, but as I'll show you, it does occur quite frequently. So why an international database? Now, we knew then that CDKL5 deficiency was an independent disorder. Yet we knew in 2011 so much more was needed to learn about aspects of the disorder, including the diagnosis, whether it was being made or not, the family's experience of the diagnosis, the natural history, life expectancy, and that will be a way back down the track because you need population data for that. Clinical variation, which I'm going to talk about in my next talk, appropriateness of interventions, possibility of cell-based treatments. So that really inspired us to set up the International CDKL5 Disorder Database in 2012. And it was a collaboration between us as researchers in Australia and IFCR. And recruitment started now nearly 8 years ago in September 2012. So we aim to collect information from families around the world on their child who has the CDKL5 disorder. And we collect information about their developmental history, functional abilities, seizures, medical problems in their management, and also the impact of CDKL5 on the family. So we have a comprehensive questionnaire, which is generally completed online, but can be made available on paper, and we can also do telephone interviews. This questionnaire is already translated into French, German, Portuguese, Russian, Italian, Japanese, and Mandarin, and further work on translations is in process. So the topics covered, I've sort of mentioned before: the early period, pregnancy, early development, diagnosis, functional domains, epilepsy, other comorbidities, sleep, behavior and mood, hand stereotypies, medications, and his hospitalization history, and also family structure and quality of life. So where are we today, nearly 8 years on from when we started? This is the present we're at now. So here we are. We've had about around 500 registrations, but they weren't all valid. You know, some did not turn out to have a valid CDKL5 mutation. But you can see there that the registrations have continued over time, and they are from about 48 different countries in total. So on the right here, you can see the countries where the registrations have come from. 40% from the US, but 5 or 6% from quite a number of other countries like the UK, France, Australia, Germany, Canada, and a few from Brazil, but we have got a lot from Brazil, and we're working on collecting that data. Russia, where we have a Russian research assistant who interviews families. Japan, where we also have a pediatrician who is in contact with families, and then the 18% from other countries. The age at registration, as the years passed, we're having more and more younger children registered. So at the moment, overall, 14% are under 1 at registration, 31% 1 to 2 years, 22% 3 to 5, and then 28% 6 to 18, and 5% 17 years or over. So that distribution would have changed over time. When we started, we would have very few children diagnosed and registered under 1, but now, you know, a large majority are that young when they register. So this is the structure of the CDKL5 gene, and you can see, as I will talk sort of in my next talk more about the different grouping of mutations which we have used and which others use, and you can see them there on that pie graph. The mutation, the no functional protein mutations, which are and they are group 1, group 2 are the missense mutations. Oops, sorry. Missense mutations, and group 3 are the truncations between after AA71 and before AA81, and group 4, the truncations after AA81. So we have now details available on 376 individuals with a pathogenic mutation. But of those 300, there are 283 distinct pathogenic mutations. 16% are recurrent. So only, it's only 16% of that number have more than one person affected. And of the 376 individuals, recurrent mutation therefore occur in just over a third of cases. And the maximum number we have for each mutation is 9, and we have only 10 unique mutations, which include greater than 4 individuals. So you understand why it's so important to collect large numbers amount of data where we can match people together with the same mutation and find out if they're different from others. And I'll be talking about that in my second talk. So what has been, we've been working together with families over this time. I just want to briefly tell you something of what has been achieved. So we have, I've told you about our original paper where we defined CDKL5 disorder as a unique disorder. Then we looked at the variability in the attainment of developmental milestones, and we found differences, and we are still very interested in the clinical differences between different groups of children. We actually looked at functional ability, to how many could learn to sit up, how many learn to walk, the level of communication, etc. We also looked at the prevalence and onset of comorbidities, such as sleep problems, respiratory problems, scoliosis. And then we've also looked at seizure variables and their relation to genotype, to the broad genotype groupings, not individual ones, and also to functional abilities. So there's some interesting associations which we're now beginning to tease out, and I'll talk about more about them later. That was up until 2017. Since then, we've published on families' experiences with the ketogenic diet and with the vagus nerve stimulator, both treatments for epilepsy. We've also published on the impact of caring for a child with CDKL5, the impact on mums, and what that means, and what are the aspects that are, that really are concerning for mums. We're starting to look at quality of life, and we've done a qualitative study on quality of life. And this final paper, I will be talking about more in my next talk about a particular young woman who has got a very mild phenotype for CDKL5, and she has no seizures. So just wanted to alert everybody to our CDKL5 database here, where people can search on characteristics of CDKL5 by age group, find out what the prevalence is in different age groups, by gender, by the large mutation group. And you just go to our website up here, and then you click there, and it asks you what you would like to search. And these are examples of the graphs that come up that you can, when you search. And here's another one. One above is for sleep, and the one below is for mobility, walking ability. So now, what are we investigating today and into the future? So our research themes this year, 2020, have been quality of life for children and adults with CDD, and Jenny talked a bit about that yesterday, and I'll add a little bit more information about that. We're working on the family's experience of the diagnosis of CDD in their children, and this is a joint project with Scott Demarest from Colorado, where he is doing qualitative interviews while we have a lot of data that we've collected quantitatively and qualitatively. We're interested in looking at changes in development and clinical severity over time using our unique longitudinal data, and I will show you one example of that. And what I'm going to focus on in my next talk is finding out what contributes to the variability in functional ability in children with CDD. And finally, we are using our data to prepare for clinical trials in combination with the IRCCN. And I know that Jenny showed a slide yesterday demonstrating the pathway that we have for that, and that's currently being funded by IFCR. And you may hear more about that perhaps from Scott as well. So just briefly on our quality of life study, our aims were to describe total quality of life and individual domains of quality of life in children and adults with CDD, and to investigate factors affecting quality of life, and to compare quality of life in CDD with other neurodevelopmental disorders, and to consider whether factors which can be modified to improve quality of life. So in that, we administered a follow-up questionnaire in 2018, where we had the child quality of life survey, QI disability. We also collected information on family quality of life and parental health and the family situation. So these are the domains, and I think, again, Jenny would have probably focused on these yesterday, but these are the domains of quality of life that are included in this instrument that we administer. So just a couple of snapshots of results. We found, interestingly enough, that those living in North America had total quality of life scores much higher than those living in other countries. And we can speculate on the reasons for that, but this was a very clear finding from the study. We also found some differences with the large mutation groups, and found that those with the missense or the in-frame mutations and those with no functional protein had a poorer quality of life than those with other mutations. In the physical health domain, I think this first point was very important. We found that those who were taking no or only one anti-epileptic medication had a physical health quality of life score higher than those on 3 or more medications, even when we adjust for seizures. So we believe that's a very important message. And again, there were differences in the physical health quality of life according to mutation group. So, these are only preliminary findings. We need a larger sample. We have principally looked at risk factors, but we need to find risk factors that we're able to modify to improve quality of life. And just one slide on our longitudinal data, which may be difficult to interpret, but what we were looking at here was looking at the impact of seizure burden at the baseline questionnaire, and to see how that affected at our follow-up questionnaire, how that affected development and severity. And this bar graph here shows you at baseline, there were those who had low burden, what we defined as low and high burden of seizures. Those who had the low burden, at the follow-up, their development was much the same as it had been before. But those who were in the red, the high burden, their development had reduced in the follow-up. So this was important to try and find out whether good seizure control early had long-term impacts on the development of the child. And this was just another way of presenting this, which basically also adjusted for the age of the child at baseline, and also adjusted for the time difference between the first and the second questionnaire, and found that the developmental score was higher in those who had low burden than it was than those who had high burden. So that's just an example of studies that we hope, more studies work that we want to do looking at our longitudinal data. So I would like to finish off by just saying that the International CDKL5 Disorder Database is we're still an ongoing research database which collects and uses data provided by caregivers to inform multiple publications in the scientific and medical literature. So long as families have already registered with ICD, they will also be able to provide consent for any data that they submit to the new registry to be accessed by ICDD. But the big message is, it is important to be aware that the data can only be linked if families register with both databases so that they can be linked. So that is a message that we really have to get out to the community. And any questions on this, that is my telephone number and my email address. And so I'll just finish by showing you how you can register with the International CDKL5 Disorder Database. You can either go to this website of the ICFR, and when you see it, you go to this page where it says to register with the International Database, please go here and press on click. Alternatively, you can just go directly to this URL at the bottom, which says register.telethonkids.org.au. Sorry, it's so long. /CDKL5 /register. Sorry about the length of that URL. So it was out of our control. And this is our registration form where you would register for this database. And then once registered, we will contact you. But remember, registering with both databases is very important for the data to be linked from the new registry back to ours. So I would just like to finish by thanking you, to especially the many families who have submitted data to our studies, and the funding and support from the International Foundation for CDKL5 Research, the Loulou Foundation, RettSyndrome.org, and the National Health and Medical Research Council in Australia. Thank you.